Okay, you ready? We are here at Outright Books with the legendary Cleve Jones as he signs some of his copies of Stitching a Revolution. Thank you for taking time out to talk to us, and it is such an honor to meet you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And I guess your book is a chronicle of not only the AIDS quilt, but your life and your activism.
Yeah, I got to San Francisco shortly after graduating from high school, and had the good fortune of meeting Harvey Milk while he was still running for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and was very involved with the gay liberation movement in San Francisco in the 1970s, and was there for the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
And is that what you're dealing with now with South Africa?
Yeah, I went to South Africa last winter and spent a month there. It was an extraordinary experience, and I had the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela, which was very inspiring. But I also spent a lot of time out in the townships and meeting the very poor people who are on the front line of this epidemic, in particular the women. And I spent a lot of time meeting with women who are living with AIDS and meeting their children and learning about their struggle. And I think we in this country, and especially in the gay and lesbian community, I think there's a growing complacency and a feeling that the epidemic is over because so many of us are benefiting from the new treatments. And I myself almost died in 1994. I was very sick with pneumocystis pneumonia, and I've been on the combination therapy since the end of '94. I've been healthy and strong, but these medications are not available to the overwhelming majority of people on the planet who are living with HIV disease, and I think that we in the West have a responsibility. And one thing I'm very concerned about is that I think that the white middle-class gay and lesbian community, I see signs that we are beginning to turn our backs on the epidemic now that the majority of new cases are among people of color.
Oh, yeah.
Shut up!
Come on.
I'm trying to do an interview here.
You started a fire.
All right. Okay. Can you speak up just a little bit?
Okay.
So did you get that? Oh, okay. Good. So, perfect. And how did you come to the idea to start the AIDS quilt?
I had the idea of the quilt at about 9:35 p.m. on the evening of November 27th, 1985. November 27th is the anniversary of the murder of Harvey Milk and George Moscone. And every year in San Francisco we have a candlelight march to remember those two men. And in 1985, I was walking up and down Castro Street with my staple gun, putting up posters reminding people of the march. And I stopped and picked up a copy of the newspaper, and the front page headline said that 1,000 San Franciscans had already been killed by this new disease. I knew almost all of those first 1,000. They were friends, they were people I'd worked with, and people I had found referrals for when they got sick. And I was standing there at Castro and Market, and I knew that of those 1,000, almost every one of them had lived and died within just a few blocks of where I was standing, and there was no evidence. And if you walk down Castro Street, it's beautiful restored Victorians, coffee shops, bars, music, restaurants. You have no idea that you're standing at ground zero of this calamity. And I was so frustrated and angry about it. And so a few nights later, as people gathered for the candlelight march, I had stacks of cardboard and sacks of magic marker, and I asked everybody to write down the name of one person they knew who had been killed. And people were afraid to do it. They were ashamed. They wrote initials or just the first name. And then finally there was one guy who taped two pieces of cardboard together and printed in big block letters, Thomas J. Farnsworth Jr., my brother.
Aww.
And after that, people began writing out the complete names, and we marched with our candles to City Hall. And then I had everybody go another couple blocks to the old Federal Building, where I'd hidden extension ladders in the shrubbery. And when the cops weren't looking, we pushed past them and put our ladders up on the wall, and with big rolls of tape, climbed 3 stories up on this gray stone Federal Building and covered it with the names of our dead. And after I got off the ladder, I walked through the crowd, and I could hear people whispering about their friends whose names were on the wall. And when I got to the edge of the crowd, I looked back, and I looked at that patchwork, and I thought it looks like a quilt. And when I said that word to myself, I thought of my grandma, my great-grandma, and it was such a warm, comforting, middle class, middle American, traditional family values sort of symbol.
Right.
And I thought, what a great symbol to match with this disease that's killing gay people, IV drug
Everyone.
users, Haitian immigrants, hemophiliacs, people that were on the fringe of our society and whose lives were not fully valued. And I thought about it for a year and a half. And during that year and a half, everybody I knew told me that the idea totally sucked. It was the stupidest thing they'd ever heard of. And then I tested positive. I got attacked by fag bashers, and my best friend died. And I was pretty much consumed with hate and fear and despair. And went in my backyard and made the first quilt for Marvin Feldman. And the hate turned into love. The fear turned into courage, and the despair turned into hope. And I thought, if it can do that for me, it can do it for everybody. And now it's the world's largest art project. We have affiliates in 50 nations around the world, and the fastest growing quilt today is the South African AIDS Memorial Quilt.
Yes, of course, I'm sure. Will the one here ever be shown in its entirety again, do you think?
Well, you know, that kind of depends on what happens in a few weeks on Election Day.
Oh, yeah.
I think that we have not felt the urgency to go back to Washington for several years, but I was looking at CNN a little bit this afternoon, and it's a very, very close race. And I think that there's a whole lot of people that have grown up under the current administration who have no idea, and maybe you're one of them, who have no idea how bad it was when the Republicans ran this country. And, you know, we could see the clock turn back very dramatically. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with the election, and we'll see what happens in Congress. But if necessary, we will take it back. But whether we go back with the entire quilt or not, we are still accepting panels. People are still dying of AIDS in this country, and we are determined to continue this project for the duration of the epidemic, for as long as it takes.
Well, that's wonderful. And your Names Project, that's an organization you've developed?
Yeah, the Names Project Foundation is the sponsor for the quilt. We're currently based in San Francisco. We have affiliates around the country, including here in Atlanta, and we expect to be moving to Washington, D.C. to create a permanent center for the quilt in our nation's capital within the next year or two.
Do you have a website for?
Yeah, the website is www.aidsquilt.org.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for taking time before signing all these wonderful books.
Thank you. Thank you
And
very
it
much.
really was an honor to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.